Greetings, fellow investors. Welcome to Nordic Finance, where we help you realize your financial goals.
If that's something you find interesting, please invest in the subscribe button and a possible like on the video. My name is Marcus.
And I'm Lucas, and today we're gonna talk about how to use investor relations. But before we get into today's video, I only have one question for you. Have you thought about getting into investing lately? Yes or no? Or perhaps you're already into investing? Let us know down in the comments below. Marcus is gonna take the lead on this video. Let's turn our attention to his screen.
Yes.
Take it away, Marcus.
Yes. So we're going to look at the investor relations and how to find them today. And for the purposes of this video, I think we're going to look at the investor relations of Microsoft, because they have a good example of pretty much everything you could want to find out from the investor relations. And right now you should see on my screen that I have just typed into, my browser, which is MetaGear, might probably be Google for you. Here I just typed in Investor Relations Microsoft. You can hit enter, and you will find it usually whatever company you type in: Investor Relations Apple, Investor Relations Tesla, Investor Relations McDonald's. You will usually find it as the top result in your web browser. So all you can do then is select, for instance, the top one, and it takes you to the investor relations page of the company you're interested in. Now you can actually find it from the web page of the company, like their normal web page, but it could be a little more tricky than just typing in investor relations and then company name. Usually it will be the first alternative there, so I would suggest that you always do that and don't try to go through the normal web page, like just type in Microsoft and then from there navigate to the investor relations. It's easier to just type into the web browser immediately.
Yes, I would second that, because I've had some troubles as well when you try to find it through the company page. It's easier usually to Google it, so I would agree with that.
Then we find ourselves on this page. It's just the investor relations. This might look a bit different depending on which company you're looking at, but it's usually some kind of news page. It might have something about the annual report, press releases, or in this case a sustainability report. Here you can also find some general things like the current share value and the market cap, and here's some announcements, recent news. And usually you can find the annual report pretty early in your search as well. Here we have a few headers that you can see here, and usually I'd say that these headers are not as extensive as in Microsoft. Here you can find company information, the earnings and financials, board and ESG, annual reports, SEC filings, investor information, events and contacts. Usually it could be something just like the company information, earnings and financials, and maybe events and contacts. It all depends on the company. No company looks the same basically, but you can generally find pretty similar information, but the information that Microsoft have provided us with here is like extensive. So this is pretty much everything you could find on an investor relations page.
And this is why we used it as an example.
Exactly. Now, we're not gonna look into every specific thing, like actually click into it, but we are gonna see what you can find on each one. So here, for instance, on the company information, you can just find the company overview and strategy and the segment information. Once again, not all companies have segments, for instance, because Microsoft is involved in a lot of different kind of businesses, and they have a lot of sub-companies and all that. And this is telling like how each of their segments are doing. Like, for instance, their OS systems and Xbox and all of this, they are different segments. So we can look at the differences here. And here is also the company overview and strategy. So you can just get an overview of what Microsoft is, what their goal is, and what their strategy for the future is. If you want something more comprehensive, you should probably read the annual reports and what they are telling there. It could be more comprehensive than this. Then we go to the earnings and financials, and this is probably the one that you would be most interested in. And if I'm to be honest, this is usually the only one I check, except for maybe the annual reports, but sometimes it's under the earnings and financials. Because here you have the financial statements, performance, metrics, segment results, once again, like how different segments are doing. You can find the income statement, comprehensive income, balance sheet, cash flows. Everything you would want to know from the financials you can find from here in Microsoft. Then here we have the board and the ESG. Now the board, of course, can be very interesting to look at, which we probably will mention in another video, that you should be familiar with what the board of the company is, because it ties into what kind of strategy they would have. So here, for instance, under corporate governance, you could see the board of directors, an overview of all of it and all of this. So this is, of course, pretty important. And then we also have ESG issues, and ESG stands for Environment, Social and Corporate Governance. And this, if this is very important to you, I definitely suggest that you look at it yourself. If you are very interested in social issues and you want to invest in, for instance, green companies, this is definitely something you would want to check out. But once again, this is a more of a personal choice when you're investing. You don't necessarily have to look at this if this is not something you're so concerned with. If you are concerned about ESG issues, I definitely suggest that you look into the environmental, social and the governance aspects of companies that you're investing in. And all of that you can find here. Then we have the annual reports, and this is a short one in Microsoft case, because this is a whole page just dedicating to find all the annual reports they have. They have the annual report here, for instance, for 2020. Here they have from 2019 all the way down even to 1996. So you can look at pretty much all the annual reports you want here. Usually, of course, it's the latest ones that you're interested in, so you can find them here. We have a video of how you can easily use the annual report for some basics.
So what we basically go through in that video is like the main things that you're going to want to look at in an annual report. It's a good little video. We'll link it here so you can get an overview of how it looks like. But here you can see on the screen the general gist of it. And these can be quite long depending on how big the company is. But for a company as Microsoft, that is, you're going to have quite a decent bedtime reading.
We're actually not going to spend any more time with the annual report though, because we have a whole other video about that. So just know that you can find it here. Usually every company has some section where you can find annual reports. It might sometimes be under earnings and financials, and sometimes it has a separate field where you can easily find it. So here we also have the SEC filings. Now, I haven't actually seen this on any other, I think, investor relations. Probably they are somewhere and you can find them from there as well. But it's generally not something you might want to look at so much, especially as a new investor, because here's like all the different filings they have done to the SEC. And generally these are not maybe something you would want to look at because it's just statements and relating things. It's, of course, it could be very important information. The problem is just that you would have to go through so much. You can see that there's pages upon pages, and a lot of this is not maybe something you're so concerned with. If you want to find something very particular, you can also go to a site called sec.gov. It's the SEC's own site, and there you can just type in which kind of statement you're actually looking for. In general, I have never so far used it for anything other than finding annual reports and quarterly results. Oh, and I might also add that here you, for instance, the most commonly used SEC filings are the 10K and the 10Q that I have looked at and heard of. And the 10K is the annual report, and 10Qs are the quarterly reports. You can find it on the SEC webpage, sec.gov, where you can easily find 10Qs and 10Ks for all kinds of companies.
Let's move on.
Finally, we have something that I haven't found so often here, but it's really good that Microsoft has provided it. It's investor information, and here you can find information specifically for investors. Even though I know this is an investor relations page, and you think that all of this is for investors, which it is, but this is more like when is the annual meetings. And here we have the dividends and stock history, for instance, if you want to track that, what kind of dividends have they paid, investment history. Here was a pretty interesting part, acquisition history, what kind of companies have Microsoft purchased. You can find some interesting information there, and of course frequently asked questions. This tab right here is not so common though. You can definitely find what kind of dividends and stock history and how the stock history looked for the company, but it's generally you have to do a bit more digging than finding it in one of the headers. Most of all this information that you have found here is provided somewhere in the investor relations page, but it's maybe not as well sorted as Microsoft's. Then here we have the events, and this is all the kind of events that Microsoft will partake in. Now, for Microsoft specifically, I don't think that this is like earnings calls and press releases. This is mostly like when they are doing collaborations as well, and here you actually have a quarter earnings conference call, but it's just all kind of events that they have. Some of them might be more interesting, some of them might not, but it's definitely good that you can check them out if you want to. Generally, I don't think that you might want to look at so many of these unless you once again have very much time, because I think the press releases generally are maybe more important than these ones, or at least a lot of them. But it's definitely good to know that they're there, and you can check them out if you want to. All the kind of collaborations and maybe what kind of exhibitions they have and stuff like that. And then finally, of course, you have their contacts header here, where you can find how to be in contact with Microsoft and some general stock information. For instance, they write here that you have to be in contact with your broker if you want to sell or buy your shares and stuff like that. So you have address, phone, email, and all this kind of good stuff. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it for the investor relations without digging much deeper in it. This was like just a brief overview of what you can find on a very well organized investor relations. Once again, not all companies are disorganized, but I think Microsoft was an excellent example of what you can find from an investor relations.
If I can summarize the video then, since you've done a fantastic job so far doing all the actual pulling. So to summarize today's video, we've been looking at investor relations. In general, what I would recommend to look at is the annual reports and the earnings calls. Those two you're already going to be in a way better position than most people.
Yeah, and then if you want to look at investor information, if they have that easily provided, you can look at dividend, stock history, this kind of stuff. And also, if you're very concerned with ESG issues like social, environment and governance issues, you should definitely check out that part as well and what the company is doing to improve or at least harm the world as little as it can.
But with that, I would like to thank you guys so much for watching. Please let us know if you had any value out of this video. I really hope you did. And also remember to let us know in the comments if you are thinking about getting into investing or if you're already investing. Let us know.
Yeah, and also in case are you planning to use the investor relations or have you done so already? Please let us know that as well. That'd be interesting to know. And with that, I guess all we can do is wish you guys happy investing.
Happy investing, guys, and have some nice bedtime reading with the annual reports.